Yeah, this is something that we get usually in the summertime, where we go through dry spells. In this particular case, we're entering into the summer months, and it's been pretty dry through late spring, and it's not uncommon to have a few weeks of dry weather with the occasional thunderstorm downpour, which kind of sets our mind that, we had a big amount of rain, but really when it comes down to 2 or 3 hours, it's not really saturating the soils and actually replenishing the water table. It usually just goes through runoff into the drain system. So it has been dry, and in the summer months, it can be even drier than it is now. And we will get calls, not all the time, but we do get calls from customers that have water coming in their basement, active water leaks, even though it may not have rained for days or weeks and the soil is extremely dry. So what are things that cause this? And there's a few common ones, and then there's a few kind of anecdote or case study ones that are interesting, usually not the case, but it's just something to consider as you move along here. The biggest culprit that we find typically is a broken pipe, whether there's a broken pipe water main from the street, but more common is irrigation. So a lot of times as we go into the late spring months, into the summer, your irrigation systems are being turned on and everything gets going for your lawn services. And what we find is that when people are having active water coming in their basement, usually it's shortly after they have their sprinkler system serviced or flush out. So there could be a crack in a pipe somewhere. There could be a joint that has come loose, or maybe it's a bad valve, and it just basically leaks in and close to the foundation. And you won't necessarily see it at the surface level because it's being saturated deep in the soil. It could be a slow leak, but once it gets enough critical mass of water, you'll start seeing water coming in. So it's not uncommon to see water on these cracks. It could be coming where the floor and the wall meet. It could be coming in between the joints of stones on an older foundation, where you see the water actually pouring in even though it's bone dry outside. Lawn looks great because it's getting plenty of water, but there's also water coming into the foundation. The other area that we see water coming in typically through pipe systems is a water main. That's obviously a much bigger issue because that doesn't sit a couple inches below the soil. It sits way deep down and it goes out to the street. So a lot of times what we'll ask customers to do, if they can, is to test the water to see if there's chlorine or fluoride in the actual water. That is an indication that it's not groundwater, that it's actually city or town water coming through. That project is much more involved because now you're talking about replacing a line out to the street. Usually those are much bigger issues. Obviously, it's the tip of the iceberg. You still want to make sure that the water's not coming into the foundation, but it doesn't usually involve excavating out and replacing the line to the street. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen enough where we kind of keep that in the back of our mind as potential options. The other issue could be just groundwater, high groundwater table. Sometimes you might live close to a creek or a brook or an underground stream that even though it's dry at the surface level, there's enough water, residual water in the water table to have water coming in. Pretty uncommon, especially during a drought situation, but it does happen for certain houses in certain cases. So obviously knowing the landscape of where you are and what other water sources are nearby can help identify potential cause and leaks. The ones that probably the most interesting that we very rarely get is, but it does happen, is people's pools that have leaks in them. Maybe you have an in-ground pool that is fairly close to your house, and it could be a gunite or concrete pool, and you have a water leak, and you just think it's warm, it's dry, you haven't had a lot of rain, you're constantly topping it off. In reality, it's actually leaking into the soil, and you may be 3-4 feet from the house, certain installations, and that's really just putting a lot of water against the house. There was a case in Chelmsford not too long ago where the homeowner had an in-ground pool and constantly kept had water coming in. We went out and took a look at it, repaired it, and was trying to figure out why there was that much water coming in. And, about 4 feet from the wall there was an in-ground pool. And, we just had asked them the question. I said, geez, have you had issues with the water in the pool? He goes, yeah, we had to top it off a lot this year. I had to keep adding water to it. And then come find out there was a large crack in the pool that was allowing water to seep through into the soil enough to flood into the basement. Again, rare cases, but these are things that you have to think outside the box. It's not always going to be rainwater coming in. It's usually an infrastructure issue nearby, whether it's irrigation, water mains, could be a water table issue, or it could be something as uncommon and simple as the pool's leaking. So it's kind of one of those things you just have to look around and observe what other things could be causing this, because it's probably not the rain.